This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 241.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Ramsey Majaba, in case you didn't know that. If you didn't know that, well, that means it's the first time for you here, so welcome. If you didn't know that, welcome back. As sales engineers, we work with a lot of different people. Our main partners are sales. Doesn't mean that we don't partner with anybody else. One of my biggest partners within my organization are my product managers. We work a lot together, mainly because my customers dictate what needs to be in the product, and that's because they're the first ones to use the product. Which means I have to have a very good relationship. I have to be able to show the value of whatever my customer is requesting to the product management. And also my product management has been great, where they find ways to get what my customers want done. So that's one huge partnership that is rarely talked about, actually, which is why I'm so happy to have Dan Hellerman on the show. He is the CPO, Chief Product Manager of Saleo. And if you don't know Saleo, go check out their website, saleo.com. Let me double check that. This show is not sponsored by them or anything. Saleo.io. So this show is not sponsored by them, but I just love talking to Daniel because of his perspective, his passion for the product that he's working on, and the fact that because he's part of the startup, he has to do everything from being a CPO, Chief Product Officer, to a sales engineer, to chief marketing officer, basically everything. So I wanted to get his take about what's it like to be a CPO, what's it like to be a CPO at a startup, and what's it like from his perspective to work with sales engineers, now that he's also been doing the sales engineering part as well to help his own customers. So that's it. Let's just jump in the show and listen to what Dan has to say. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Doing well today. How about yourself?
I'm doing. I should have asked you before we started. Is it Dan or Daniel? Because your emails say Dan, but here you have
Dan is great.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's good to have you on, Dan. For those curious about why I'm asking you what your name is, can you share who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Dan Hellerman. I am the co-founder and chief product officer of Saleo, which is a demo environment platform. And so we're different from anything else that you guys might see in the market, in that we're the only platform in the market that allows you to control your actual live software demo in its live native environment. And so we're working with companies like Drift and Clary and SalesLoft and Terminus to help them power their live demos.
Okay. So I am curious, what is a chief product officer?
So chief product officer, it's sort of a catch-all title, right? As a startup and at the size we are, right, you tend to wear a lot of hats. So it's not just about product, it's about marketing and sales engineering and everything in between. But the title chief product officer basically came from, Saleo was my baby when I texted my co-founder Justin McDonald and said, hey, I've got this great idea. So we sort of go chief product officer on the idea that we've created Saleo from the ground up, right? So every bit of UI, every bit of UX has come from a mixture of Justin and I's brains, and sort of hell-bent and aligned on helping sales engineers do their job better.
Okay. I'm thinking of a better title for you, and the one that I can think of is a DEO, everything officer.
That is exactly what most startups need, right? It's when you're small and you're going and raising money and doing things, right? You're not just doing the UX, you're doing all the product requirements, you're meeting with the engineers, right? You're wearing every hat in between, but it's to me, it's the only way to develop a product, right? If you hire a chief product officer and they only know some small portion of your product and they're not intimately familiar with the pains of your customers, right? Similar to sales engineering, you're not going to build a good product, right? You're not going to build something that's aligned, right? When you've sat down and you've listened to sales engineers and you know that they struggle with X, Y, and Z, and you're going to go build a solution to solve that, then you're directly connected to your customer. I've never seen companies like those fail. Ones where I've seen chief product officers sort of sit over a product and say, hey, I run this and I do nothing else. Product-led growth, right? It's all about listening to your customers and building what they're looking for.
So how do you listen to your? I mean, you're two people, right? You first started as two people. You've grown since then. How do you listen to your customers when it's just two? And I have many questions about how you pick the second one, but let's say you were working with your co-founder. How do you listen to your customers while working a full-time job? Most likely, were you working a full-time job?
Oh yeah,
yeah, and working on this at the same time.
So I've been a serial entrepreneur. So to me, it's always keeping your ear to ground and listening for problems that pop up. If a business has a problem and they're willing to solve it for it, right? And you can throw a subscription around it, right? That's where every one of your SaaS ideas come from. And so for Saleo specifically, I've spent years of my life. I was previously at a company called Sev1 that was in charge of monitoring networks for some of the world's largest companies. We sold a network performance software and monitoring platform. And then at Terminus, right, I spent 7 years both building technology as well as being the subject matter expert on advertising technology and account-based marketing. And while I was there, right, one of the things that we really hammered home as gospel was this idea of account-based experiences, right? The idea of like, if I'm talking to Apple, I better have all of my content aligned towards Apple's wants, needs, and hopes and dreams. And what I was seeing over and over again is that as people were giving software demos, I demoed a lot of technologies during my 7 years at Terminus and years at Sev1 before that, was that nobody was ever giving me a personalized demos, right? If they did, they would typically win the deal. But most people didn't have unique use cases set up to why I was approaching the software. I was seeing a lot of like Acme Company and Dunder Mifflin and their data. I wasn't seeing live and active products. And, Terminus as an account-based marketing platform was constantly saying, hey, I'm demoing this company. They're in this industry, but our demo environment was either our own data running or it was sort of a generic instance. And so I started getting me thinking like, oh, man, how can we display this data better? And we sort of took it from there, right? It was as a sales engineer, seeing our sales engineers get frustrated, trying to load data into the back end, spending 7, 15, 20 hours. I was a lot of like the Gartner and Forrester presentations that our company did. And we would spend sometimes upwards of 60 to 80 hours prepping to build a customized environment just to show off for a single 1 to 2 hour brief with industry leaders. And so, we would do the same for customer demos.
So if I understand correctly, you didn't go out and find a new set of customers that you're trying to break into. You already knew the customer set. So you were listening to the customers because, you're already in that environment. They're your friends and colleagues, and they complain to you about that sort of thing. And
exactly, right? You start hearing it over and over again. So if only I could show this, or I can't show this feature, this piece of the product isn't working, or it doesn't have enough data, or it's got personal identifiable information, right? If you're paying attention and you're listening to your coworkers complain, and some of my favorite coworkers are the solutions engineers, sales engineers we had at Terminus, right? As you hear them, you start collecting that feedback in the back of your head and be like, okay, well, if I was going to go to market with a solution for this platform, what do I solve for fast? Well, what are your top 5 complaints, right? It's not personalized. It's not showing the right metrics. I don't have enough data. And you starting to tackle for those problems. Be like, okay, well, what else is bothering you?
Yeah. I mean, good sales engineers don't mind complaining. I've noticed that. Like, you want us to do when someone takes pride in their work and they're not getting the support they need, they will let people know. So good sales engineers don't mind doing that. They also try to find workarounds and solutions, but still, I would tell you what makes it easier for me.
They absolutely will. And it's one of the things that I've always found crazy is like, for our sales teams, right? We teach the president's clubs, we send them off to crazy vacations on the, coast of France and Spain and all these different places, but we don't treat the sales engineers the same way. And when you think about the lift in the sales cycle of what a salesperson does versus a solution engineers, right? Like, I know sales, I'm not knocking sales. They put incredibly hard hours and do a lot of work into a doc, but I've never seen sales engineers do more work to get a deal across the line, right? For a single 1 hour demo, they could be doing 20, 40, 60, we have some customers here that they would be spending 2 to 3 weeks of the time solely dedicated to building a demo instance to make 1 hour long demo go well. And that was the hinge point, right? The part that sells the customer. And then we're like, leaving them behind, right? We're leaving them at the tarmac as the salespeople fly away, right? And so it's the companies that I see treat their sales engineers with the same rock star status as their sales team, and hopefully their marketing team. And I have a lot of heavily weighted opinions on other teams being treated the same way. Tend to be the ones that succeed and end up the most successful.
it is funny because like I sell to a lot of technical. I sell to engineers. Like, my product are used by engineers, and most engineers that I talk to hate salespeople. And I have to remind them, like, you have your company has salespeople that are selling your product to other customers who are then paying so you can have a salary.
Yep.
Right. But like salespeople, most salespeople I see, I find that they appreciate the engineering team and the work that they do. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have anything to sell. But I don't see it vice versa. Just from the engineering team liking the sales team, or they appreciate the SE team more than the sales team, for some reason.
I've seen that a lot. Well, I think it's because the SE team sort of have a innate understanding of the back end and how a product works, right? They're not just coming to them saying, we need a feature that does X, Y, Z, right? They sort of understand the bounds of product development, even if they don't understand the hard details. Though I've met some software engineer solutions engineers that are just as good as software engineers. But I think it's really a credit game, right? We spend all this time saying, hey, this salesperson, closed this deal and won this company. And a lot of the times it's just that Me Too idea. It's like, well, that engineer wrote the patch and did this integration. The solution engineer spent 60 hours behind it, right? I think there's probably a significant structural change that we'll see in the future to how companies are built, especially ones that are focusing on this product-led growth, to making sure that anybody that's participates in the successful sale of software is fairly compensated, and that they're hell-bent on that idea, right? It does. For software engineers is paid 180 grand a year to only do development. Facts, like, what benefit is it to them to spend 10 hours writing a custom code and script that's going to get a deal across the line, right? So when you tend to share more of that credit and that relevance, mostly money for these people, right? That's where you're going to see benefits.
Yeah, I do see salespeople giving credit, good salespeople giving credit where credit is due. Is just you can't really put that in the bank. So,
exactly, right? Money talks, right? It's the way to motivate people better than any gift card or anything else you can get, and that's we align heavily on that.
So I wanted to go back. You mentioned that you have a co-founder, Justin. How do you know when you're about to work with someone that, considering it's your baby, that they're going to take it and work with you the same way you would want to work? How do you find that person?
Yeah, so that's such an interesting question, because you're talking to somebody who usually wants to do it all, right? Like, I'm the guy that's like, I'm going to do it because I'm going to do it right. The difference with Justin versus anybody else, and the reason that I immediately went to him with this idea and like it had connected with him, is like, I know in the past, right, he had mentioned to me, man, if only we could do X, Y, and Z better. And so I already knew that he had been thinking about that idea. But mostly, I had this sort of huge benefit that when I was at Terminus, we acquired Justin's company. He's previously CEO of a company called Ramble Chat. That's, big, heavy drift intercom competitor. And so I got to see what it was like for him to come into a new company after being acquired. He took over a huge portion of product development, as well as me. So we worked side by side for 2 years, including with Jason Deegan, who's our head of software development here at Saleo now, all together, all running 6 different products across Terminus' platform, having to work together for nearly 2 years together before we launched Saleo. And so I knew how he worked. I knew how his brain thought. I'd seen him, how he approached different meetings, both tough ones and simple ones, and the whole gamut, right? Everything from layoffs to massive successes and everything in between. And so I knew, like, in my head when I had this idea, so Justin's the kind of guy I want, because I know how he handles himself in a million situations. There's no surprises for me. If I was doing it net new and I didn't know anybody, it would be probably a much harder process for me.
And even though you knew Justin, did you have a hard time, or how did you handle the concept of losing control over something?
So for me, I knew that I was hell-bent on product, right? Like, when I focus on something, I focus really hard. And I knew that I didn't want to do the job as CEO. So literally, like, the second I called him, I was like, hey, I'm going to do this company. And not only that, I want you to be, let's split this up. And he was like, he was sort of like breaching that subject. I was like, I'm going to just cut you off there. Like, I want you to be CEO. I don't want to do those activities, the fundraisers, all of those parts, right? I want to be hell-bent on building this product and having that free time. And so for me, it wasn't about losing control. It was about giving up the things that I didn't think would make the company successful if I ran them. Like, I have experience. I've raised money before for companies I've developed product before for companies, and where I was always successful was in developing product and the day-to-day going out and fundraising and negotiating those deals. Like Justin's an expert level sales guy, and I was like, I knew he was the one I would want negotiating those parts, and so it sort of necessitated that role, and his experience having sold his company right to a company like Terminus and have been CEO and writing a ship for a few years there, just sort of it was a natural choice.
Okay. And right now, like when you first started, it was just the two of you. Or you had a head of engineering, right? So
we hired Alexis Svetlyakov, who was a contractor with us at Terminus.
okay.
Had worked previously with Justin at his company Ramble Chat, and we brought him on as a co-founder and as the sort of the engineer for the entire product.
Okay, so you were the vision person for the product. Alexi is the hands-on getting it done. You're doing a lot more like, from the marketing side as well. I see. Like you have a webinar. You have webinars monthly, almost at least monthly.
Exactly.
So you guys do you organize that. You do a lot of that, and so that makes me feel like all right. You gave up some control to someone else to do the product, even though you're hell bent on doing the product. How did that go?
Yeah, so it's really different. So for Alexi, he was the engineer that everybody looked up to at Terminus as being one of the smartest and best. So like there was very little hesitation to say, hey, I'm putting my baby in this person's hands, right? It's like, I have a car I love, and there's very few people I would want to drive it. But if you told me that I could have Max Verstappen drive my car, right? I'm going to hand the keys to him because I'm like, my baby's going to be okay, right? And so it was very similar with Alexi that, we pitched the idea to him, and in his opening email back to us, he wrote like 15 ways that this idea could be accomplished, and all of them were ones that we had talked about. Like he was not off that path, and so handing that over became really easy. And then product's a lot more than just the engineering and programming, right? Like there's UI, UX, how are people going to, the human computer interaction sort of part of it. And so it was really nice to have somebody like Alexi who you were like, hey, when he uses a library or he's picking an API or he's picking the framework for the back end, that's not my specialty. It's going to be there. It's going to be scalable. He's the guy that's already thought about those versus having to take time out of my time to be like, okay, well, let's research this. Do we use Lambdas? Do we use Fargate? Are we an AWS shop or a cloud shop? How are we going to set up this infrastructure, right? Having somebody like that to back your ideas frees up a lot of time and a lot of research that like I could have possibly done, but would be nowhere near as good as having an experienced engineer do it. So everybody sort of falls in place.
Okay. And in terms from like a customer perspective, you working with customers initially, you had 3 or 4 people on the team that are doing everything. What was I know you mentioned Justin, he was a salesperson. He's a CEO salesperson. Were you involved with customer interaction? Was Alexi, who did the sales engineering part of the process?
Yeah, early Saleo days, and even in fact still today, typically we're doing a call. We have the Jim Tosi, who's our senior account executive. Typically it'll be Justin or I demoing while Jim presents and sort of makes the content. We're planning on hiring a solutions engineer probably very early next year to take over a huge portion of the demoing, but it's sort of always been us, and there's a reason for that. A couple different times in our history I posted for a solution engineer and then pulled it back, because what we've realized over and over again is that we want to be the people demoing right now, because the questions that we get, like we're demoing to solutions engineers. And so the first questions that come out of their mouth after you're done presentation are the next 10 product features we're going to want to build, right? It's like, oh, but can you do this? Oh, would it be really cool if you did that? Is there a way to do X, Y, and Z? And all of those are incredibly valuable product learnings that we come out of almost every sales cycle with 10 to 15 new product features that we then put in a list. Like we use ClickUp for task management organization. We have a set roadmap, right? Which is like, hey, this is what we're going to do now through March of next year, right? You can't plan much further beyond that when you're a startup and the market's changing so fast. But we have that set roadmap, and then we have about 1,000 ClickUp items that are categorized to different categories on when should we do this? Should we do this in the future? Should we do this in now? If we see other companies start to do them, we'll sort of track their success and see what's going to happen with them as sort of micro companies to see how the market is overall evolving. But I'll say, back to the idea of giving demos, right? Both Justin and I see the incredible value in being the people presenting the software should know it best. And so as we onboard, like we've had a few people reach out that would be really phenomenal solutions engineers that we want to bring on, but we want to make sure that we have the time to sort of properly onboard them, right? You don't want to just throw somebody in and say, hey, go demo this software. You want them to join, grow a unique understanding almost at a product officer level of this is what our product is capable of doing, and then match that, because we're not just matching, Saleo is so unique that we're not just demoing one piece of software, right? Our software helps you demo your software. And so plugging in and understanding the innate backends and the intricacies of SaaS and software products is incredibly important, and it requires a special solution engineer, because you're not just selling one piece of software anymore. You're selling basically an adapter, almost an API to other people's products.
Okay. We had someone from ClickUp on the show back in show 212, Kelsey Frost. So
Oh, nice.
if anyone's interested in listening to, we didn't talk about ClickUp at all, but you can hear about the culture of ClickUp at least there. So you wanted to hire an SE. You've pulled back a couple of times because you were being asked questions that are more about future features and all that. How do you see that change? Like, if you do hire an SE right now, how would that be any different? That's a question that I don't know. My company, it's been around for 80 years. I'm still asked those questions. How would it be any different?
Sure. So I think it's just a difference of early development versus later development, right? And taking those features, right? A great solutions engineer is a great solutions engineer. Doesn't mean that they may necessarily know to bring those product features down to product and say, hey, we need to instill these, right? There's a benefit to selling software, and there's a benefit to selling and building. I think as we hire the right one, there definitely will be, like, it's a collaborative experience. But for us early on, there's just been so many individual learnings on a per customer basis that we've just really not wanted to hand it off. We've seen it much more valuable use of our time to sit on those demos than not.
Okay. And I am curious how you would actually pass on those learnings to the new SE that you hire. If there's so much of it, how will they collect all that information? How will they be able to actually use it for their future meetings?
Yeah, so we are sort of hell bent on organization, because I've done a lot of startups that early on weren't organized, and so outside of just organizing those in ClickUps, we have very public product development sort of areas on our Slack channels. And so an SE or a new employee that joins, like we probably have, for a small company that's like 22 people right now, about to be 25, like we have a ton of Slack channels, and we have things that's like, hey, this is what we're hearing in the market, this is our competitive intel, this is our product features, this is potential, like our dream big product features, wouldn't it be cool if, and in those threads we say, hey, I talked with Ramsey, he was saying it'd be so cool to have this product feature that did X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't think this is for now, I think this might be for the future, but it'd be really cool to inform X, Y, and Z. And then we'll discuss that in thread inside of Slack, just like a normal kind of Slack conversation you'd have. And then we we link that comment thread to a new ClickUp learning, so that the engineers and people can go in and talk about that. So basically any product-led discussion that's like, hey, I talked with the customer and they did X, Y, and Z, that discussion becomes a task that becomes a potential item in the future, or never, right? It just totally, we have a huge shelf, road to the shelf. But I think that's where a lot of those learnings would come through. It's say, hey, this is what we're hearing in market. And the more we hear them, the more we're sort of saying, hey, we're hearing this over and over and over again. Let's move this out of here. And so we have ratings of 1 to 5 and things like that, as things are heard more, we just sort of bubble them up to the surface of the product.
And I'm curious about, I'm always curious, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, the demos.
That's a sign of a good engineer.
Not if they say I'm curious all the time, but hey, that's a different story. If you add your product, you mentioned it's an adapter, right? You adapt it to, let's say ClickUp. ClickUp wants to use you as for your demo profile. When you want to show them your tools, you're pretty much adding Saleo to their website, and then they're seeing it as if it's their product going. So it's very interesting that your sales engineer is going to have to learn all these different products to be able to demo. Like, they're not demoing Saleo, pretty much. They're demoing ClickUp.
Exactly.
Or
yeah,
whatever.
and so it is the most fun I've had in the world. And also, like, knee shakingly nervous when you're doing it for the first and second time, is this idea of like, I am demoing a product back to people that demo this product every day. And I have to do a good job with it, and I have to show complete control. And I not only have to do that, I have to show an innate understanding, right? So where other platforms get away with like taking an interactive screenshot of the product and just sort of showing it over, like when Saleo connects to a product, right? If you imagine, like, let's say you have a number of like spend, right? That spend number in Saleo is going to show on one screen. It might show on another in a widget. You might be able to create it in a BI side of the tool somewhere else, right? So it's having a neat understanding of all those data connections and where things feed through. And when people click X, Y, and Z button, how does that connect? Because it's all the branches of a typical SaaS platform, while also reducing the complexity of, having to create huge amounts of data. And so it's very interesting to get sales engineers' reactions. Like, I have demoed software and been part of like a subject matter expert for companies for probably 10 plus years. And I've never had a sales demo where people gave us like a clapping or a standing ovation. And it's happened on probably 15 demos we've given in the history of Saleo, or where people literally showed their hands and said, I don't care how much, I'm buying it this week, sort of thing. And we're, a more expensive tool. And so, and that's not some like marketing lie that I tell that people tell just like make a sale. Like, it's literally happened where enterprise level companies signed 6-figure deals within 2 weeks of seeing Saleo. And you have to have a very deep understanding of the product. And so when we hire solution engineers for Saleo, it's not just people that have a love of demoing products, it's people that have a love of software in general. Because all of that SaaS does, I always say this to our people, is like, all of SaaS is there to make complex data simple. And Saleo's job is to make all of that complex data loading that would normally have a product super simple, so you can demo what you have to do, right? But when products have data that references other data and subtables and parent-childs, it can get really complex. And so our job as a team is to sort of manage that complexity with the need to scale, so that you have a complete demo environment. Your entire product is working the way that it would be expected to work in, and you're not just giving some non-working fake version of your product and demo. You're demoing a real live product environment driven by real data. And so it's a tough responsibility, but I'll say we have solutions engineers at both companies that we're selling to now, and net new companies chomping at the bit for the opportunity. Because when you love software and you love demoing software, it's your ideal thing, because you're demoing a new piece of software every week.
Yeah. For that demo, is it like the first demo you do, or is it more of a proof of concept? Like, is it the first time the customer sees the product? Are they seeing it in their own environment, or are they seeing it in like a mock environment?
So we never show in a mock-up environment. We have a training environment we use for internal people, but when we demo Saleo to companies, we have a few customers that have allowed us to actually show Saleo working in their live demo environments, because we feel like that's so important to say, hey, this isn't a fake environment. That's something we built just to look good for you, because we've seen, some of our competitors sort of demoing the same sort of Kanban test stuff. We're like, no, here is a incredibly complex SaaS platform. Here's the proof that we're logging into it. Here's this, really, really complex piece of their product. And here's how simple we made it to load data to it. And so typically we're doing that. We do POVs from time to time. We've moved away from them. Just like I was talking about, we just sold a huge deal to a company that never even did a POV. They saw our demo, they wanted it the next day, and we're already onboarding. But nice. We've we do POVs, and that's sort of those are very fun to me, right? It's micro things. It's like, hey, what do you think we can't handle in your products? It's always sort of like a ballsy question to ask, because you'll get crazy stuff. Like, we've done giant Fortune 50 companies in a week that it's like, oh man, can we even support this? Not for that we couldn't support it, but it's like, man, we're trying to turn this around in a week. To to some of the leading companies like SalesLoft, or on our website, they're saying, hey, we have this huge module and it has sub people and it's tracking emails and stuff. Demo this back to us in a week with our real data in it. And so it's very, very, very interesting POV process, because it's like we have never not been challenged on them by a customer saying, like, I'm going to give you my my gotcha thing that I think nobody could control, because this is a unique to us, whether it's a custom graph type or a view that nobody else has, or it's a feature of a software that nobody has. And they're like, how would you even do this? And then we get back together, we figure out how we're going to adapt it to Saleo's platform. We write the connector, we send it back to everybody, and we have it back in a week, and people are just, I mean, when I say jaw dropped, people are, amazed that we can control what we can control, because a lot of these customers are, are using some of our competitors, the interactive screenshots game. They're dropping them after 3-4 months because of those same problems, right? They have very complex data, very complex products, and an interactive screenshot doesn't cut it when it comes to demoing their software.
So you've been doing kind of everything, but also the sales engineering role for the last 6 months. My question is, would you want to switch back to marketing versus staying in sales engineering, considering you're getting standing ovations and stuff?
No, so I think for a while I'll still be on the demos, even as we're onboarding certain solutions engineers. Like, it's especially for big clients and customers, like if you're a chief product officer and you have lost your ear to the customers, and most importantly to the potential customers on the sales engineers, right? You've lost that competitive edge, right? You're getting to hear directly from them in market and ask questions that could inform your roadmap. I do imagine, right? My hope is that we'll hire somebody in marketing that has a similar love for product. But I think that, we've seen a lot of companies succeed really well where a head of marketing, whether it's a CMO or just a head of marketing, VP marketing, reports into the product team, and they do sort of a product-led marketing growth. Like there's a huge benefit to informing a market, but when you're not aligned, when you're not sort of talking about, hey, what's to come, let's build content around this because we know we're releasing X, Y, and Z feature. Let's pre-educate the market on why this is best, so that by the time we release this feature, X, Y, and Z happen. It works really well. And I've worked for a number of companies that have operated in silos where marketing doesn't know what product's doing. They're announcing, outside of like maybe working on a new feature release, there's really no idea. And I think when you can do the two hand in hand, you start seeing really good lead generations. Why, we've been so successful early on, and we're getting these deals, and we're not really working with smaller companies. We're working with like the name brands of the world, right? Like the SalesLofts and the Terminuses, is because we are adopting that same account-based marketing approach that I learned at Terminus, right? That's like, hey, these types of companies care about this. So when we're doing our marketing, let's not spend tens of thousands of dollars on all this sorts of different ads and animated things. Let's write micro campaigns speaking directly to demo engineers. Hey, demo engineers, we do it like these guys, but we're in a live environment. Look how much, this is why it's better, right? That's a micro thing. We have some campaigns on LinkedIn that are going out to 3,900 people across the entire world, right? Which is very but they convert at an incredibly high rate, and they're, it speaks directly to it. And so that's sort of always been my goal, is when we're doing an ad, when we're doing, one of these, sales processes, that we're speaking directly to the person and we're answering their problems, because that's the point of our software. If we're not doing, it's almost the same as the value prop for Saleo.
So, like, you're going to remain involved. You're going to be in marketing. You're going to remain involved with the customers. You might hire another marketing person, and you remain chief product officer. When it comes to larger organizations, what mistakes do you see them doing when it comes to marketing and customers?
Yeah, so it's a complete disconnect, right? It's a lot of times, like I said, I do not see product and marketing teams aligned where they're one's even talking to the other, right? Marketing is hell-bent on thought leadership around a general area of space, but not necessarily on new product features. And product is set on building these ideas, but they're not hearing back from marketing what the overall market is talking about, right? Like if the market has shifted and is talking about a new topic or a new keyword or a new SEO keyword, right? Like we've seen the sales demo experience area go down to from the keyword personalized sales demos to sales demo environments to sales demo experiences to interactive product experiences, right? Like there's all these different keywords. It's how you brand and how you build a product to market is going to innately affect how you sell. And so I think the biggest part you're missing is just that product marketing sync up. And to me, it's not just like every couple of weeks, the CPO meets the CMO and they talk. It's why we have all these Slack channels. It's like develop in public. Very little conversations as our company should be happening in private Slack channels. They should be happening publicly, where the company can follow on. They can weigh in and input. Marketing can say, hey, I'm hearing X, Y, and Z. So whether you're working, and same idea for marketing, right? If we're working on a webinar or we're working on a white paper, and I'm like, hey, the white paper is like, hey, 10 ways to improve your sales demo experiences, and I'm like, well, hey, I'm in marketing. Sales demo environments is a bigger keyword than sales demo experiences, or vice versa, or people seem to be searching, or I've seen Ramsey and Peter Cohen and Pre-Sales Collective all using this new demo term recently, that's the content that you want to stay on the cusp for, right? And so if they're calling them demo experiences, maybe our new products should be called demo experiences and not demo environments, because that's where the market's going. And so there's a definite huge value of bringing in, like, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen, but you need to make your company acutely aware of what's going on in market. And we have, even as a small company, we have weekly all hands where we're like, this is what we're seeing in the market. What are you guys seeing? Right? Our sales guy pipes in and he'll say, I'm seeing X, Y, and Z. And our marketing guy will hop in, and it's, stays aligned.
So, I mean, you and I can talk for hours because you have a lot of interesting things to say. We're about to move on to the not so fire round. I just have one question.
Yeah.
About what you do. So you've been around sales engineering for a while. And for the last 6 months, you've been doing the actual job on top of everything else that you've been doing. So over the last 6 months, is there anything that you've learned that you didn't know before about sales engineering, or things have shifted about the role itself that can help future generations?
It's the quantity of work and the myopicness. Like, I've always been really good friends with sales engineers, and sort of they click with me. But there's a couple of different categories of solutions engineers, sales engineers that I've run into, right? You have the showman, that's basically like a personality play, right? And then you have I always say myopic, but I feel like that word has a negative connotation, right? Like the attention to detail is innate, right? You have somebody that is, I want to make sure that this part of the demo has this piece and this has to tie into here. And they're incredible storytellers because they can weave it in between. They might not be people persons, right? The same way a sales engineer too. And then you have the third sort of category, which is like, and typically this is more at an SMB where they're like a product expert, but not necessarily an expert in there. And then you have like the Sherlock Holmes, I always call them, right? And they're these guys that will interrupt every 10 seconds to ask a question, right? And just like you were talking about, it's the inquisitive nature. The best ones obviously sort of fit among all the categories, right? They ask the right questions. They're myopic to a point where they want to make sure their demo matches what the questions that they've asked, right? And their personality too, where like they just have a good personality, and they can present really well, and they're not they're a little bit of a showman. And so I always think of them, like Justin and I, when we were talking about branding to the company, we liked a lot of like the F1 stuff. Like imagine the Formula One drivers, right? They're showmen, right? They're like, they're celebrities of the world, right? But they are also race car drivers, right? They drive super fast, but what they're doing is so technical, right? They've memorized the track, they're hitting the laps, they know when to downshift, when to accelerate out of a corner. That's a sales engineer. And so that's sort of what I'm seeing as breaks down the people in those categories and how they function.
I like that. Now I'm gonna have to use that. Okay. All right. I'm gonna need to absorb all that information.
Hopefully you're an F1 guy. I'm not a huge F1 guy, but my co-founder is, and so I hear about it all the time.
I used to be an F1 guy. My brother is an F1 guy. He misses his son's birthday to watch F1. No, he'll bring the TV with him. But he really likes it. So I hear a lot of information. The one thing I would differentiate between the two is usually the F1 guys get credit.
Yeah, exactly. They're getting the trophies.
I would say it's more like the pit crew is changing the tire. I think that's the sales engineer. They come in, just do their thing, and somebody else takes the credit. But I like that. All right.
Sales engineers do all the racing, and then the pit crew is the one on the stand at the end, right? Sort of flipping it up, right?
Yeah. All right, man. It is time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions I ask pretty much every guest, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. And so I'll start off with the first one, obviously. What is your superpower?
Ooh. It's probably being a jack of all trades while sort of being a master of a chunk. Like I have an innate benefit of loving software and being obsessed with computers. Like I've been coding since I was in like kindergarten. I'm not even getting like fluent in different web languages and pieces like that. And so to me, I can look at any software product and sort of break it up into its parts. And so that not only makes me successful here at Saleo, right? But it's part of what led me into companies like Sev1. It was like, it's network performance, so it's got to be monitored X, Y, and Z, right? Like I had always studied software and how it interacted, right? And when I joined Terminus, I took over building their advertising, right? In a world that like there's very few people across the world that are industry experts in cookies and web tracking technologies and how they can all interact along with privacy concerns. And like that to me was like, like a drug. Like I was addicted to figuring out how all this stuff works. How does it connect? I call all of SaaS, when we're talking about, people ask what it's like working at Saleo, adapting products, right? To make them demo. I call it adult jigsaw puzzles. If you like to solve a problem, you do really well. And I love to solve software problems. It's been what I've done since I was a little kid, and it's very fun for me. So I'd say that's my superpower.
Nice. I like that. So the second thing I guess I would ask, which you may have already answered, what is one thing you would change about the role of sales engineering?
That's outside of them getting more credit, I think that's it, right? And getting on those trips. I think that they honestly should be involved even earlier than they are now. I think one of the things that we're missing for sales engineers is a proper handoff of accounts and account databases. Like when you imagine, so this, like the last 2 years seem to be the first years that pre-sales teams have ever really gotten a budget to buy tools, right? Whether it's Saleo or it's one of our other competitors in the market, or company like Vivin or pre-sales or Consensus or any of these guys, right? That sort of just popped out in the last couple of years. But when you think about empowering sales teams, right? Sales teams, like your account executives, get fabulous tools like ZoomInfo or Apollo, where they do all these research on a company before the demo. I have never seen that data getting to a sales engineer, right? They're going to hop on the call. They're going to be like, hey, I'm meeting with Saleo. They're like, okay, like, in 2 minutes. What does Saleo do? Well, they build demos. Okay, cool. Then they're in the demo. Like all of that sales intelligence that you're giving to the AEs are equally, and I would argue more important for the sales engineer to have than it ever was for the AE. It's great for the personalized outbound, but so if you brought them in earlier, right? Whether it's maybe not at the SDR level, but the second you get that nibble back, it's like, hey, we might have an upcoming demo for X, Y, and Z. The second that you schedule that demo, you got to tell this is that company, this is what they're doing, this is their recent press releases, this is what it seems like they're struggling with. A sales engineer that's prepped with that, even from the first call, to ask the right discovery questions, to then build, whether it's a customized demo environment or just a good demo flow. Peter Cohen talks about the menu method, or, when you're breaking down a big product, like that's how they succeed. And so I would change that, the amount of knowledge that are given to solutions engineers. I cannot tell you how many I have talked to that just get on a call and they're like, yeah, I learned about the company 2 minutes before and now I'm demoing to them.
Yeah. So I find great SEs know how to do that. They figure out a way to be part of discovery, be part of to be able to weave the right story for the demo. The problem is, you're right. Like most companies, you would need the great SEs to do that on their own instead of it being part of the process.
And their AEs may or may not send it, and the company may be like, you want me to buy you a ZoomInfo license? That's going to cost me thousands of dollars a year. What's the benefit for that? You're not prospecting. And it's like, they're not thinking about the quality of the demos. Mostly, I think, because these companies haven't had personalized demos or things before, or if they did, they realize the amount of work it is. But I think this newfound idea of solutions engineers almost being the world's greatest marketers and sellers and superheroes all in one, right? It's I think we'll see a lot of that come to their to their aid.
Hopefully. All right. So the next question is usually about any resources you would recommend. You already mentioned for sales engineers. You already mentioned Peter Cohen. You guys have your own webinars. Where can people register for your webinars? So
on Saleo.io, our website, we have a resources section. We'll also have a big banner ad up announcing both. We've got an upcoming webinar with Peter Cohen. We're going to have one with you as well in early December. And so we host a lot of content and do resources there. I'm also a big fan of reading through content like the Pre-Sales Collective, Peter Cohen's book, Doing Discovery, a lot of his blogs, like the Perfect Demo Environment Reveal. We did a content on, and then I am a huge fan of sort of hanging around everywhere from like Stack Overflow to LinkedIn on like the hashtag pre-sales or demo or any of those sort of trending topics. Like almost every night when I'm sitting watching TV with my wife or playing with my kids or just hanging, right, I always check out the latest. I have like 15 different hashtags that I check because I want to see just what in general people are talking about. What are they struggling with? Where are they coming from? And I'm a big fan of like the LinkedIn groups as well. I just find that LinkedIn hasn't been very conducive to conversation in those groups. Like, there's a lot of pre-sales groups on LinkedIn, not a lot of ones where they're discussing. I like the Slack groups, like Pre-Sales Collective has a great one, Rep Genius has a great one. Gosh, I'm a member of like 15. If you look at my Slack, my left side all has a bunch of different ones, because I just like to hop in. I'm not as heavy as a contributor, because I like to be a silent observer, but even Reddit has a great sales engineering subreddit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last question of the day, of the not so fire round. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
Yeah. For me, it's organization. Like everything exists up here. And it's a pretty organized brain, right? It's not scattered or in pieces, but for my host of my career, I've always been like the single subject matter expert. And so I'm like, I don't have to write this down, because a lot of people don't have to learn it. And the people that do, I can sort of sit down with. As we're building a company from scratch, the most important thing, I think, is having the resources that people can empower themselves, learn the way that they want to learn, right? Like not everybody's like Dan that just wants to look at it and learn it and play around with it. People have different learning styles, especially as we're building things like documentation and internal product questions. And so it has been organization, right? It's been like, hey, just don't throw this in a Slack group, make a new group for this that's specifically around this topic. If we're going to do X, Y, and Z, make sure that it's documented correctly. And so it's been a fight against my own my own brain to write it all down, but it's shown immense speed in getting people up to par and onboarding. And so it's nicer for my employees. They don't have to listen to me talk for hours at a time.
All right. Well, last question of the day, Dan. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, super easy, Dan Hellerman or Saleo, saleo.io. And my email is super simple. It's dan@saleo.io. So you don't even have to worry about spelling my last name. That's not super difficult. I'm always up for connecting and talking about the roles. One of the best parts about joining and started Saleo has been working with some of the people in early pre-sales that are like looking to find a job and just looking for advice. Like I know when I was starting out in startups, especially, I had a hard time getting people's ears to ask them questions like, how do you go and do X, Y, and Z idea? And so now that I've been well versed in SaaS, it's very fun for me to I don't have enough time to mentor people week to week to week, right? But if somebody reaches out to questions, I do my absolute best to respond, whether it's on LinkedIn or anything else, about whether it's about a startup, whether it's about the demo space in general, or whether it's just a general tech question. I feel like you get back what you put in. And so it's to us, we want to try and help. Like we built Saleo to be the helpful resource for everyone. And that's sort of the brand that we're banking on. And so if somebody has a question they want to concern, or even if they're a company that may not be able to buy us now, I'll still help advise them. Well, we even refer them to our competitors in a lot of cases, right? Which is like some people may see as bad business, but to me, if you're helping somebody when they join a company that's big enough to buy you, or they have a problem that's going to do it, they're going to remember the person that helped them and help them at their, even at their own detriment in some cases, right? If you're like, hey, we're not there right now, or we're not that solution, you should check out X, Y, and Z. You'll build a brand on it, right? People come back to you.
Nice. All right, Dan, I'll leave a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. I appreciate your time. Was there any questions you wanted me to ask that I didn't ask today?
No, I think you nailed it.
Awesome.
You're a great interviewer.
It was great talking. I appreciate that. Thank you. It was great talking
Absolutely.
to you. Hope to talk to you soon.
Sounds good. I'll shoot you an email a little later today, tomorrow, with the get your approval on the webinar pages, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So stay tuned for the webinar. Thank you so much for listening. This is the end of the show, obviously. I really enjoyed talking to Dan, as I mentioned at the start. He does a lot of different things, and we're working on a webinar together, which will be coming out in December live. So I've seen the way he works on a lot of different things, and having this conversation with a chief product officer, seeing what he sees about sales engineers, see what he has learned about sales engineering was great. So I'd love to get your takeaways about what you think the relationship should be between a CPO or a product manager and a sales engineer. How can we improve that? Is there a reason to improve it? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can reach me at Ramsey Marjaba at WeTheSalesEngineers.com. You can actually book some time with me if you want to chat about the hotline. It's at Ramsey, we the salesengineers.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Ramsey Marjaba. You'll find me. I think I'm the only Ramsey Marjaba there. So that's it. That's all I have to say. With that, I'm signing off.